Miss Smith, my name is Colonel Tia Kareem, representing the Unified Intelligence Task Force. If I could have a word in private.
No. Not getting any closer. Just tell me what you want.
I'm sorry, but it's my solemn duty to inform you that your friend, the Doctor, is dead.
Don't be stupid.
He can't be.
Last Sunday at 1700 hours, the body of a Time Lord was returned to the Earth. Unit scientists have checked the DNA results, and it's definitely him. I'm sorry, Miss Smith, for your loss. Sorry for the whole wide world, because he's gone. The Doctor's gone. He's dead.
Hello and welcome to Who Watches Who, a Doctor Who podcast with me, Matthew, and as always we are joined with...
Scott. Hello, I am Scott.
Yes, you are Scott, indeed. Hello. If you're watching on YouTube, at the moment I look like I'm exploding in the sun because of the Word document I've got up, but there we go, look at this. Whoa, I'm in pristine HD with my new fancy webcam that I bought myself. Fucking Scott's not the only one with the good quality picture now, bitches.
Is mine really that good quality?
It was comparatively to my old webcam.
Yeah.
Yes, but it's
Okay.
like you've got like a decent enough setup, but now I've got all these funky settings I can do with my one. Like I had to install a separate program just so my computer could recognize my webcam. It's that fancy. It's
Wow.
For anybody wondering, an Elgato Facecam. It's very spicy and it's fucking huge. Like it's like this big thickness wise. I'm holding my fingers several centimeters apart for audio listeners. And
Looks pretty small on my screen.
My old webcam was this thick, so it's a huge difference in size.
Get your new webcam in the same frame so I can see the difference.
But yeah, I highly recommend it. It's a pretty funky little thing. I've also got a new graphics card coming for my PC. I got a 30 series. Maybe I'll start streaming video games again.
Maybe you should start streaming Doctor Who games.
Since I'm currently... Oh, fuck, I could actually stream some Doctor Who games, since I'm currently got nothing else to do.
What was a new one that just came out last year?
I don't fucking give a shit. The broken one, yeah.
The puzzle one that doesn't work.
Yeah, I might stream that, actually. That could be fun. We'll have to think of a date to stream that, or I'll just start streaming it randomly at like 1 o'clock in the morning. But massive sidetrack. This week we are looking at a Sarah Jane Adventure episode, something we've not done since Liz Sladen month, which was like what, a year ago?
October, yeah.
Wow,
roughly a year.
Yeah. And we are looking at The Death of the Doctor, I think is what the episode is called, which is a pretty serious sounding title for a kids show, don't you think? Like, it's got death in the name.
And yeah, I'm sure the Doctor is going to die in this spin-off
in this
show.
random spin-off show on CBBC.
Yeah.
But this episode first came out on the 26th of October 2010, which at the time of recording was a staggering 11 years, 9 months, and 7 days ago. And it aired on a Tuesday of all days for a TV show to air. I guess kids need something to watch on Tuesdays. I didn't watch this show on. I watched like a few episodes on CBBC, but I never watched it religiously, so I never saw this episode.
Sarah Jane for me was like after school viewing. It was important to watch. You know, anything Doctor Who at that time I needed to consume.
Let's see, 2010. I was probably just playing my Xbox after school every day, or going outside with friends and playing with friends.
I had just started secondary school, so this was when CBBC was kind of going out the way for me. When I felt like I was too old,
too cool for it.
You know, I was still watching Sarah Jane Adventures, and obviously it wouldn't last much longer because the next series would be the last. Sadly,
yeah. At this time, the US president was Barack Obama, while the UK Prime Minister was David Cameron. Have you got any guesses as to what could be the number one film in the US box office on this day?
Yeah, so it's October, isn't it?
It is spooky season.
So it's a spooky film. So I think this was round about the time of the late 2000s, early 2010s, where it was like every year there'd be a Conjuring film or a Paranormal Activity. Is it Paranormal Activity?
Which one?
The second one or the third one?
Make a decision. Make a choice.
Number 2.
You are 100% correct. It is Paranormal Activity 2. It is number 1 at the box office right now, and it will be not there for very long because Saw 3D comes out the week after this and immediately fucking destroys Paranormal Activity 2. You ever seen either of those, Saw 3D or Paranormal Activity 2?
I've never seen a single film from either of those franchises. But again,
Wow.
Saw is another franchise where it's like one came out every fucking
year. Yeah. I've seen every Saw movie, and they progressively get extremely bad. And I've seen the first few Paranormal Activities. I watched the first one very recently again for maybe the second or the third time. And like the last time I had seen it was a teenager, and now I'm, believe it or not, a fully grown adult man. And talking about a kid show on CBBC, but this when I was watching Paranormal Activity, I've never been more bored in my life watching a film. It was not as good as or as spooky as I remembered it being. I think a lot of the spookiness for that film came from the excitement and the hype from hearing other people being scared of it. So you yourself made yourself scared of it when really fuck all happens. Like
I imagine part of it was the gimmick as well, because found footage was just. It wasn't brand new, but it was what everybody was doing at the time.
It was really the Paranormal Activity kicked off with found footage. It's like zombies of the time, isn't it? It made it popular.
Blair Witch did it before, like in the late 90s, but it wasn't done popularly enough. And of course, years later we had Cloverfield.
Yeah.
Which again, I don't think is a good film. Cloverfield.
It's so good. It's so fucking good.
I prefer 10 Cloverfield Lane of John Goodman.
That's a good film, but Cloverfield's like just an excellent sci-fi horror, and doesn't shit the bed at the end. Like, in other news that we've got happening on this day, that is very interesting if you're interested in film production, specifically huge fantasy blockbusters, as crisis talks between the New Zealand government and Warner Brothers to prevent the Hobbit film from moving its production to another country end inconclusively. If you want to know a lot more about this, there's an amazing, three-part documentary? Three-part documentary on Lindsay Ellis's YouTube channel. It's fucking amazing, and it goes really in depth into the shenanigans that was the filming of those Hobbit trilogies and union involvement and actors not getting paid or actors getting overworked or whatever the hell it was, and just not knowing if they were making 2 or 3 films, a complete mess of a production. And it showed on screen. They made one decent film and the other 2 were garbage. Fun fact, I'm actually going to be going through the entire Middle-earth saga this week. So
same here. Because I'm preparing for the new Amazon show.
Yes, that's what I'm doing as well. So all this month I'm going through the extended edition of every single film in the Middle-earth trilogy, and starting obviously with The Hobbit, and which I'm looking forward to because it's fun, but I'm
starting with Lord of the Rings, the extended editions. I'm not sure if I should start with Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit, but my idea is I'll do the extended editions of each movie across 2 nights because fuck sitting there for 4 hours.
I'm doing it across this month. So because it comes the TV show comes out in September, the start of September, I think. So I can watch one every week of this month, and then by September I'll be done. Or maybe two a week.
You'll have to double some weeks because I think it comes out September 2nd.
Yeah, double some weeks. But that's what we're doing, and it seems much more manageable than binging it in one sitting. Yeah,
we'll probably talk about it at the end of the month.
Yeah, we will.
For me, this will be the first time I watched the Lord of the Rings extended edition.
Same.
I've only actually seen the movies on Channel 4 years and years ago, and I think they were censored as well. So
I've only seen the regular theatrical cut on DVD. I've never seen the extended editions, so this will be my first time going through. I've read the books, and the Hobbit book specifically is one of my favorite books of all time. So I'm very much looking forward to revisiting Middle-earth. It's been a long time.
And I never got to see that last Hobbit movie, so it's going to be interesting to see.
I hope you like watching grey CGI run into more grey CGI. It's one of the most dullest looking films I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, because for a while those Hobbit movies came out right around the time of my birthday, so I would always watch them as a birthday treat. But the third one, I don't know what happened, I just completely missed it.
Yeah, you were like, this isn't a treat anymore.
The first one was alright, but I think the second one was a bit... It felt like it was dragging on a little bit, and you can obviously tell It was supposed to be 2 movies, but we just dragged it on.
Especially with the way the second one ends and the way the third one starts. Oh my god.
Yeah, I just hear the third one is just all action. It's supposed to be like the.
It's supposed to be like
conclusion.
It's supposed to be like Return of the King. How Return of the King is
Yeah.
like an entire fight, but it's like really boring fighting. It's like it's literally just grey CGI. Although maybe my opinion will change when I see it again. Maybe I'll fucking love it. Who knows?
Yeah, so if listen to our end of the month news review and you'll hear our opinions, I guess.
Yeah, probably. What a coincidence. Now turning our eye back into history, let's see what was going on the 26th of October throughout time. And we first go back to 1492, where, for the first time in recorded history, graphite pencils are used. I think they were used in France, specifically. It doesn't actually say here, but I think it was France. 1492, 26th of October. Graphite pencils come into existence. And then if we jump forward to 1776, a very important year for all our US history buffs, Benjamin Franklin departs for France on a mission to seek French support for the American Revolution, which is something that he would get with the promise that America would help them out later on, which they wouldn't do. Suckers. In 1863, the International Conference begins in Geneva aimed at improving medical conditions on battlefields, and this was the beginning of the formation of the Red Cross. And then we jump into 1901. The first recorded use of a getaway car occurs in a robbery of a shop in Paris. So
nobody ever thought of using a car.
Yeah,
actually, I guess cars
were really new in 1901. Yeah, and they were like, "Fuck it, let's get away with this."
Was there ever like a getaway horse and carriage?
Oh yeah, for sure. They're definitely like cowboys, isn't it? You know,
Yeah.
bandits and whatnot. In 1951, Winston Churchill gets re-elected as the British Prime Minister at the ripe old age of 76. Imagine electing official in their late 70s, like, to run your country. What were people thinking back then to be like, oh, this really old person, let's elect them. They know what's going on.
Like, we still talk about this to this day. I just think hiring people past their 70s as like elected officials is just so stupid. Like, their minds are just turning into Putin, you know?
And sure, there'll be a few people that are pretty compos mentis until they're late. Like, look at William Shatner. He's like 90,000 years old and he's like still cognitive. I wouldn't trust him to run the country though. I wouldn't be like, yeah, he should run the country, because he's really old and has really bad ideas on a lot of things because he's super out of touch, because he's like 96. Actually, I think he's like 93, but he's
I just saw the other day him on Twitter complaining about Star Trek becoming woke.
Yeah.
But like, Star Trek's always been woke. You are Star Trek.
William Shatner, you had the first ever mixed race kiss on television. Yeah. What are you on about that Star Trek's woke?
Madness.
Yeah, he's just old. He's just too old, But he looks so good for his age. Either he's got the best plastic surgeon or he's going to live forever. Like, he
looks about 20 years younger.
He does legitimately look way younger than he is. In 1958, Pan Am flies the first ever transatlantic jet from New York to Paris, which, when you think of it, it really isn't that long ago. The first ever flight across the Atlantic.
That's crazy.
For a jet, In 1984, The Terminator, directed by James Cameron, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger and Linda Hamilton, is released in the United States and is, a pretty fun sci-fi horror film with a much better sequel. Terminator Genesis. I'm joking. Terminator.
Sometimes I can't decide which one is a better Terminator movie, 1 or 2. They're so different, but yet they're both brilliant in
I haven't
ways.
seen either in a very long time, but 2 has always been my favorite because it's just so much fun action that keeps you at the edge of your seat, and the special effects have mostly held up really well for number 2.
Oh boy, yes, they really have.
And we're jumping forward quite a bit now to 2015, where the World Health Organization, never heard of them, classifies processed meat as a carcinogenic. And I was like, what's a carcinogenic? That's a fancy word. And it turns out it's basically a substance, organism, or agent that's capable of giving you cancer. So, I'm glad I don't eat processed meat.
But you know who works in the World Health Organization?
Who?
Peter Capaldi.
Does he really?
In World War Z.
Of course. He
Do you remember? He
yes.
was the Who Doctor.
He was the Who Doctor. Yeah. What a weird thing. In 2017, Jacinda Ardern, whose name I probably mispronounced, is sworn in as Prime Minister of New Zealand, becoming the world's youngest female head of government. And she's still in charge to this day, and things seem to be pretty groovy in New Zealand. They handled COVID better than anybody, I think.
I've heard quite a bit from her over the years. She seems to be like the best leader of the country at the moment. Like everywhere else is going insane, man. But she seems reasonable enough.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind moving to New Zealand. In 2019, a raid by the US Special Forces kills ISIS founder Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi? I don't know. And he's killed in Syria, which is relevant to today because Joe Biden was just like, hey, we killed the leader of Al-Qaeda, the new one. Which is like, okay, I guess we're just assassinating people. I mean, not good people, but we're still just assassinating them with robots. What a weird life we're living in. In 2020, NASA announced that there is more water on the moon than previously thought in sunlit areas as well as shadowed regions. So, I mean, if there's water on the moon, there's whales. And I think we need to start getting some whalers up there and whalers on the moon. Sing a whaling tune. That's
we work all day and we work all night. We sing a little tune.
It's a reference for any lovers of Family Guy. In 2021, NASA scientists think that they have detected the first ever planet outside of the galaxy in a Whirlpool Galaxy M51, which is a staggering 28 million light years away. Really cool that we've seen a planet that far out. Completely useless information for us because there's fuck all we could do to get that far.
It is walking distance.
Yeah, I mean, it would take 28 million years. You know, if you're traveling at the speed of light, it would take 28 million years. So imagine if you're walking it, you would never, ever, ever reach it. Like
you could give it an old try.
I mean, you never
Run.
know. You never know. You never know what could happen. You know. But that is all the information I've got for On This Day, Scott.
Very nice.
Shall we move into the creation, the writing segment?
Heck yeah. So this episode, The Death of the Doctor, was supposed to be written by Phil Ford. And Phil Ford did quite a lot of Sarah Jane Adventures episodes. He did like most of them, I would say. Scheduling conflicts that meant that Russell T Davies himself had to write it. And who ever heard of Russell T Davies? No one, exactly. So the idea of the Death of the Doctor and having the unit involved was there already, but Russell T Davies then began thinking about some old companions that could come back, and his idea was, how about every companion comes back, you know? Like, it's the Death of the Doctor, why not have every companion come back? But then, you know, this is a CBBC show, budget, so you could only bring in one, and Joe Grant was probably the best choice, because Sarah Jane Smith replaced Joe Grant. So yeah, it was obvious casting. So Gary Russell phones Katie Manning saying, hey, I can't tell you anything, but just stand by your phone. And she's like, what the fuck's going on? So she phones her agent, and her agent is like, I don't know what's going on. I can't tell you anything. So she's just so confused. A few days later, Katie Manning is desperately trying to get to a theatre in London, and Russell T Davies phones from LA. And Russell T Davies simultaneously gives her directions to the theatre and tells her the news that she's going to be in Sarah Jane Adventures. So Katie Manning was a huge fan of Russell T Davies and thinks that, you know, Russell T Davies bringing on Doctor Who to a new generation was the best thing that could have happened to the show, because it's a night and day difference between classic Who and modern Who.
It is.
It's crazy. It's crazy how different the show is.
Yeah, it's you know, it's very. We've spoken about this a lot of times with Russell T Davies's reimagining of Doctor Who, in that it's so exceptionally different, except like it manages to maintain the feel almost, you know, the themes that the classic Who was going for, while updating it for more modern times and morals and stuff like that. It's a brilliant reimagining, soft reboot type shit, you know.
Yeah, this episode shows a lot of classic Who, and it's insane to just think it's connected somehow, because the Sarah Jane Adventures, even though it's a spin-off of Doctor Who, feels so much different entirely to Doctor Who as well.
It does, yeah.
It's crazy, man. But yeah, Katie Manning hasn't missed an episode of Doctor Who since the show came back, and I think she might be the only classic actor who still keeps up to date with the show, which is pretty impressive. You can see her on Twitter just defending all the haters to the, all the timeless child haters. She's just like, I think this show is brilliant. She really loves the show, man. She might be the biggest fan at the moment.
Yeah, that's real sweet, isn't it?
And Katie Manning was worried that people wouldn't want to see her return, but with Russell D. Davies behind the script, she just felt confident that it'd be a good script, and she was happy to just return. And she is wonderful in this episode.
Oh, yeah, she's full of charm.
And yeah, that's all I've got for the history.
Wow.
It's a short one.
I mean, it's a kid's show. There's not really much documented information about it, is there?
Yeah, I've never heard Matt Smith's experience of working with on the Sarah Jane Adventures with Liz Sladen, apart from, in the Remembrance special when she passed away. So yeah, it would be nice to listen to Matt Smith's experience on this show.
We'll get him on the show. We'll get him on the podcast.
He filmed it straight after Series 5, which is insane. Like, an episode hadn't aired yet when he filmed this episode of Sarah Jane Adventures.
Wow.
He only did one scene at the end of Time. That's the only thing that we've seen of him when he was filming this episode, which is wild.
Yeah. Very fresh to the... Well, not fresh. He's shot his whole thing, but fresh for us audience people, where am I going? So, with that being said, Scott, shall we jump in and start breaking down the death of the Doctor?
Rest in peace.
Cuz. Shanshi's are making them remember.
I know!
Then don't you see?
Don't see anything!
We do the same.
Opening call. Yep, Sarah Jo, can you hear me?
It's almost ready!
Listen to me, both of you. I want you to remember.
We are doing it. That's the trouble.
No. I want you to remember everything, every single day with me, every single second.
What's he doing?
Because your memories are more powerful than anything else on this planet. Just think of it, Sarah. Remember it, Joe, but properly. Properly. Give the memory weave everything, every planet, every face, every madman, every loss, every sunset, every scent, every terror, every joy, every doctor.
I remember.
So our episode begins with a voiceover from a guy explaining the premise of the show, where he's like, Sarah Jane goes on adventures with kids, and one of them doesn't have a belly button. And I'm like, okay, whatever. But, it's like just if you're a kid watching it and don't know what you're watching, it's fine. But what I'm curious about is this main cast of people, Rani, guy whose name I don't know.
Clyde.
Rani and Clyde. They weren't in the pilot, were they? When we covered the pilot?
Yeah. Clyde joins the show in episode 1 after a pilot. Because it was a pilot, and then time went by and we made the TV show.
Fair.
And Clyde replaces, I think her name was Courtney in the first episode. She was the annoying girl we really did not like.
Yeah.
And then Rani replaces Maria partway through season 2.
Okay.
Because I think the actress who plays Maria wanted to go to college or something, or do something else. I can't remember. And obviously Luke isn't in this episode much because the actor for him wanted to go to college as well. So yeah, the cast is mostly different at this point.
Yeah, Luke's barely in it. He's like video call guy, which is a shame because he's like not got a belly button, and that's like his one thing. But the episode opens up with a video call with the belly buttonless kid, as he's like, oh, everything's great in college. I had to write an essay, and I've got a crush on this boy, and then...
Yeah.
Clyde is like, oh, but I he's like all dejected, and then the dude's like, haha, got you, bitch. But yeah, it was real like homoerotic energy coming off the two of them, wasn't it?
Yeah, you definitely notice what Luke has a crush, because the BBC wanted a gay character to appear in a show, and Russell T Davies decided to plant the seeds that Luke is gay, and obviously that never went anywhere because of the unfortunate death of Elizabeth Sladen, which is a shame. I think eventually he replaced this show with Wizards versus Aliens, and there was a scene where one of the main characters comes out as gay, so he still got to write a gay character in a kids show. So
Nice. But they're having this call where like nothing really much is happening. It's just to be like, hey, what's this character up to? And it's like, he's doing fuck all. And then suddenly an alarm goes off and units swarm the house, which I thought was a really like action-packed way to start. Like, it was like, oh, this is like a fun start. Oh no, unit are here. This is way more like Doctor Who universe is invading type shenanigans with their fucking red berets that they come out in.
it confuses me because why are they armed and why are they rushing around? It's just to inform somebody that their friend had died.
It's unit. They've got like a budget they have to justify their budget, you know. So they have to just make huge expenditures whenever they don't need them.
But yeah, rushing into an old lady's house with guns.
Yeah. But Sarah Jane stops them before they get into the house, and she's like, "Whoa, I'm not having any soldiers on my property." A line that she'll go back on almost immediately. And she's like, "You can, whatever you have to tell me, you can tell me right here." And the unit lady's like, "The doctor's dead. He died a death, and he's dead." And then Rani and Clyde are like, "No, that's impossible." Have they met the Doctor? They must have met him at least once.
Yeah, they met the 10th Doctor at the last season. It was the wedding of Sarah Jane. I almost said wedding of River Song for some reason. Different episode. But yeah, this entire time, Rani's dad is across the street and he's just watching the unit men with guns roll into Sarah Jane's house. He's not panicked, but his daughter's in front of people with guns or anything.
No, he literally in like another scene, he's like, "That's a weird lady, that Sarah Jane, isn't she? What's she up to? Oh, me."
If I was my kid and I just saw people with guns in front of her, I'd be like, "What the fuck is going on? I need to rush over there and see what's going on."
Hey kid, you're not going to hang out with the weird old lady across the street anymore because the army has shown up. But on the news that the Doctor is dead, we then basically swing into the Sarah Jane intro, which is a pretty fun Doctor Who-inspired intro, I think.
It's short and sweet.
Yeah, short.
We spoke about it in the first episode we covered of Sarah Jane. Yes,
which was many moons ago. And then we come in to Sarah Jane with a soldier in her house. The one thing she said, she was like, whoa, no soldiers in my house. And then immediately there's a soldier in her house, where the soldier is explaining that the Doctor was found on a distant planet by this alien race called the Shan-Sheath, which are like galactic undertakers, basically. They just go around collecting dead bodies and sending them back to be buried. Sarah Jane's like, "You just made that up, that's not true." Mr. Smith, with all his fucking wit, joins in and is like, "Oh, but actually, it is true, Sarah Jane." Sarah Jane literally tells him to stop talking. She's like, "Shut up." We see a projection of what the Shan-Sheath look like, and they're like giant vulture men, which I like. The idea of them being vultures, which are of course scavenger birds that tend to eat dead things, I think was just very, very nice.
Yeah, and the costume is beautiful.
It is.
It looks like a Jim Henson creation. It looks wonderful, and I'm so glad they didn't just go for a generic CGI monster here, because that would not have aged, and it would have been
like awful. A lot of the CGI in Sarah Jane, it would be trash, whereas the practical puppets, you're like, oh, that's got a charm to it. It's a charm little thing, you know. And these are huge puppets, so they have a lot of charm.
And obviously, the one that comes in the hologram is voiced by David Bradley, who is, of course, he would later go on to play William Hartnell in the biopic, and also obviously the First Doctor, and also he's in Dinosaurs on a Spaceship, which we're covering next month, I believe. So
he's a great actor. He's a great actor.
And obviously at Harry Potter as well.
Game of Thrones.
So many things.
Yeah.
And more Game of Thrones connections later on.
Oh yeah.
The second month in a row where we've had a Game of Thrones connection.
Yeah. Well, House of Dragon's about to come out, so there's another Game of Thrones connection with Matt Smith. Like
everyone's been in Game of Thrones, man.
Yeah.
And also in this episode, Sarah Jane is just xenophobic. She's just like, "Oh, you look at them, you can't believe them, you can't trust them."
Yeah, but Rani rightly says, "Hey, Sarah Jane, you can't judge somebody by the way they look. It's by the contents of their character." Because obviously this is a kid's show, and so it has to lay out morals and explain those morals in a clear and concise way. As
Also, it does help that the brown person in the cast is saying that as well, which...
I mean, it's a pretty diverse cast. They could have literally anybody but Sarah Jane say it, you know? Although weirdly,
cast.
weirdly with Clyde, they use his race as for a lot of humor. Because Clyde is a black man, or I guess a black teenager. And a lot of the time, there's like at least 2 or 3 jokes where he's like, "Wait, I'm white," you know, or when he starts turning into Matt Smith, you know, he's like, "Wait, that's not my hand, it's white." It's just peculiar, but I guess harmless.
There's also a scene where he foreshadows Ncuti Gat was the Doctor.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I caught onto that as well. All the secrets. Russell T Davies was thinking so far ahead. But the scene goes on to explain that the Doctor died saving 500 children from something, and that he's going to be returned back to the humans because he's the last of the Time Lords, and they were like, fucking didn't know what else to do with him. So
it does make sense, of course. Obviously the Doctor was working with Unit, so returning him to Unit makes the most sense of this scenario.
Yeah, and so Unit's like, hey, if you come by to our top secret base that we've got on the side of a mountain, then we'll let you come and look at the Doctor's body, and that'll be chill. And Sarah Jane's like, hell yeah, I'll go, because I don't believe the Doctor's dead. So I think you're running me for a fool right now, which is like, okay, I mean, the episode's going on, whatever. We then cut to a very nice scene, I thought, with Rani in her house, where her dad's like, yo, that Sarah Jane's such a creep. And Rani just gives her dad a hug without really saying anything. And she's like, you know, just promise me you're never going to leave. And he's like, what, not even to the shops? Ha ha ha. And she's like, yes, not even to the shops. You're never going anywhere. It's actually a very sweet little scene with... Yeah,
that's Russell T Davies for you. I think he focuses on just family. Famously, Star Wars Episode 8, family. It's about family, all about family.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do like little touches of humanity here and there, because this is a very weird, strange episode of Sarah Jane.
It is. We then get a very short scene with Sarah Jane where at first you think she's talking to herself, but she's actually talking to belly buttonless child over the camera. And she's like, you know, I always thought that if the Doctor died, I would know somehow. I would get this feeling in my chest or something like that I would know. And the belly buttonless child is like, are you going to the funeral? And she's like, yeah. Which really, you know, it doesn't really give us any new information other than that she has a hunch that she would know, which plays into it slightly at the end. But other than that, nothing really of note, because it's just repeating the information we were given like 30 seconds ago.
Yeah, it is. It still annoys me whenever we're like, oh yeah, the Doctor's going to die. But also at the same time, the Doctor's a time traveler, so you'd still be in contact with the Doctor potentially in the future. So it's not like he's ever really going to be dead, because, you know, he's a time traveler. You can visit him at any point.
Nah, that doesn't make sense. If he's dead, how can he travel in time, Scott?
Oh, that's a good point. You got me there. Checkmate atheist.
We then cut to a scene where Rani's dad is like, hey, when people die, somebody experiences grief, which is when they're like really sad all the time that their friend is dead, and sometimes they do weird things and sometimes they deny it. It's pretty well written, I think. Maybe you know, explaining what death is a bit too hard, but remember, this is a kids show. So a lot of kids probably haven't really had much experiences with death and would be wondering why somebody like isn't upset. Like Sarah Jane isn't upset. She's just like, nah, it doesn't happen. And he's like, you know, sometimes denying it is a process that people go through because it can be so hard to believe. And he's got this really you know, it's a somewhat fun story of his wife who doesn't exist.
She appears, I think. She's the stereotypical overprotective mother. She's not in every episode, obviously, but she appears every now and again. I think there's a funny episode where she's meets the Jadoon. I can't remember exactly what happens in that episode.
Sounds hilarious.
But she does. But she kind of convinces herself aliens doesn't exist. When she's facing off against the Jadoon, there's some funny moments where she's ignorant of aliens.
Fair. But she's like, you remember when Granddad died? She was doing all this weird stuff, and Randy's like, yeah, she was like washing walls, just doing everything until she suddenly started crying. And it's a nice little scene. Then the unit rock up with their car and they load up the bags. And as they're saying goodbye, Clyde's like, "Hey, good luck looking after the school without me." And so is Clyde like? I guess he just is Randy's dad's like the headmaster, or
I believe so. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
But I believe he comes in to replace the headmaster. He might have gone missing at the end of series 1 or something.
Right.
I can't remember. It's been a long time.
And then he gets like an electric shock from the car, and he's like, "Whoa, did you see that?" And I thought sudden change of character for Randy's dad. He's like, "Yeah, it's called a static shock. You'd know that if you paid attention in class. You fucking idiot." He's just really aggressive suddenly. And I'm like, you were like talking so calmly, like about grief and stuff, like 5 seconds ago, and now you're calling this kid dumb. Like,
yeah. Well, that was when he was talking to his daughter. He doesn't give a shit about Clyde. But also,
fair.
Speaking of a scene where Clyde's speaking to Rani's dad and Rani, there's a point where Clyde is like, "Oh yeah, Luke thinks that Sarah Jane is just completely bonkers now," which seems kind of out of character for Luke.
I think Clyde's making it up.
Yeah, it's very bizarre.
I think he's lying. I think he's a liar. I've called it. Clyde's a liar.
Because why would Luke think his mum is going crazy for being in denial potentially?
Yeah.
Because it's one of the stages of grief, and Luke would know that. He's a really smart man.
Yeah, but not having a belly button makes you think weird things. The car takes them to the unit base that is apparently in the side of a mountain. It's a really interesting matte paint, because it's a matte painting, this base, and there's the real live action, which is on the bottom left here, is like just off a regular tunnel that's clearly not on the side of a mountain. And they've like matted over with CGI and whatnot this painting on top of the tunnel, and it does not blend at all. Like, there is a harsh cut between like, oh, this is brickwork, and suddenly a mountain. And where is this mountain in the regular like geography of England? Because it's fucking huge. I
think we could have just been like, "Oh yeah, it's a tunnel,
underground.
It's a closed road, and it's underground."
It goes underground.
Isn't that what Stargate do? There's a tunnel as well.
Stargate, yeah, it's a tunnel, and it takes you underground. Yeah,
that's all I know about Stargate.
Yeah. But it's not very well hidden base either, because it has the word unit plastered on a giant tower on the side of it.
But in Doctor Who universe, it makes sense because Torchwood has the Torchwood logo inside of its base.
Yeah,
like, you just see characters walking around on. Oh, there's the Torchwood logo in the background for some reason. There's Doctor Who Experience in Cardiff.
Yeah. But that being said, it's a nice matte painting on its own. It's a bit jarring when next to the live action stuff. They get taken into the base, and they're basically told that they can only go where they're told to go because this is a operating military base, blah, 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 blah. And Sarah Jane's like, "Oh, you don't trust us?" And I'm like, it's an operating military base, and you're civilians. Why would they just give you all access? Like,
yeah, but also Sarah Jane used to work with UNIT.
Used to work,
okay, fair enough, but still. She can be trusted, but I guess since, spoiler alert, lady here is an evil lady. Mm-hmm. She can't be trusted.
Yeah, they're getting the tour of the base, and they turn a corner, and she's like, "We've got Grask here," or Grosk here, or whatever. And they're like, "Holy shit, you've got Grask here? I thought those were bad guys. They were like attacking us. What's all this about?" And Grask are little men with the little alien boys, and she's like, "No, these aren't Grask. These are Grosk. They're like slightly related to the little alien boys, and they're little alien boys themselves." I really like the makeup for the Grosk. Yeah. I think it's really very charming.
One of them is played by the little red man from Voyage of the Damned that we really like.
Oh, I know his name.
Banana
Banana Cafalata. Banana Cafalata. Ha ha ha. Banana Cafalata. Yeah, that's great. I'm glad he got some more Doctor Who work.
Russell T Davies really loves being like, "Oh yeah, these aren't the aliens but they're related to the aliens."
Yeah, they're slightly different. It's a weird little. It's a bit of charm, isn't it? You know.
I mean, they never pop up outside of the Russell T Davies era. Wonder if they'll ever come back.
I doubt it. They're so niche. Maybe they'll be in the background of a shot. You know. But the Grosk is like, hey, we're building a big rocket to send the Doctor off in. Come look at it. And they all go see this big rocket. And they're talking about the Doctor's death, how he was like found alone, but he saved all these people, yada yada yada. And the Grosk is like, hey, this kid stinks. Talking about Clyde, he's like, this is the smelliest kid I've ever met in my life. And then Grosk is like, yeah, well, you're blue. Which is, I thought we weren't judging people by the way they looked, which rightfully Rani like jumps in. She's like, hey, you can't judge people like that. And then there's like this exchange back and forth between like, oh, you stink, oh, you're ugly, because of course this is a kid's show and it's some light humor.
Yeah.
Everybody leaves, and then the Grosk is like, when I said you stunk, I meant you smell like time, which is okay. The Grosk can smell time.
Time is a smell. Time is a planet. Time is a person.
As a person, yeah.
Also, the rocket ship. The rocket ship was supposed to be a final set piece for the episode, but Russell T Davies realized we really don't have the budget, so he decided to just have them all in the room instead, which works out fair enough.
Yeah, it's fine. So the episode continues with them coming to the funeral where the giant vulture men, the Shanshith, are like, we're so sorry for your loss. We're so sorry for your loss to everybody that comes in through the door. And that they're like remembering, reflecting on the memories of your past loved ones is what you do when you're in this room. You think about adventures you went on with them, not for anything nefarious, just to do it. And that there's not a lot of people at this funeral. It's just kind of generic people. And the reason for that is because it was hard to find people the Doctor knew, which I feel is crock of shit. But hey-oh. It'd be way too expensive to bring back everybody, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and the people there don't really look like anyone the Doctor would know, because they're supposed to be unit soldiers, which is implied that they would have worked with the Doctor at some point. But none of them really, they look sad. They just kind of sit there staring at the wall.
Yeah. But Sarah Jane demands that she can see the body inside the casket, to which the unit lady's like, you don't want to do that. He was like totally messed up, like beyond repair. He was grotesque, gruesome. You'd be scarred for life if you saw it. And Sarah Jane's like, oh, well, I guess I won't. And then she sits down and she comes to the realization that she's pretty sure that he regenerated, because the last time she saw him was David Tennant staring at her through a window like, I'm gonna die. And so she wouldn't even recognize the Doctor if he was dead, because it could be literally anybody. They could just kill a random person, stick him there and say it's the Doctor, and she would just have to believe it. So seeing the body wouldn't bring any sort of conclusion.
Which is an interesting concept, just not knowing which version of the Doctor it is, what he looks like.
Yeah.
Or what she looks like, even.
Yeah. She then tells the kids to go sit somewhere else because, as we've established, Clyde smells of time. But she's like, I just need to gather my own thoughts, sit by myself for a while, as this harp thing starts playing by one of the Shanshith, and we start getting flashbacks to Nostalgiaville, where we see David Tennant as the Doctor, and the last time that he was on an adventure in the Sarah Jane episode, running around this big house, trying to get the TARDIS back or something? Was that the plot of the episode?
It was a wedding hall, and I think the TARDIS kept on. I think the wedding hall was in like a temporal zone, existing in its own time zone, and it was like a Groundhog Day scenario where events started repeating itself, and the house was it was a weird episode.
We then get like a shot of Tom Baker as the Doctor, and we then get a shot of John Pertwee as the Doctor, and then suddenly smash, there's the sound of glass shattering as Sarah Jane slips out of her nostalgia dream thing, and we see one Joe Grant and one Iron Fist come in through the door.
With the clips, I was beginning when I remember as a kid, I'm watching this episode, and I was so worried because I was like, "Oh no, please don't let this be a clip show," because it gets dangerously close to being a clip show in some scenes.
It's big on the nostalgia baiting this episode, with the flashback scenes where it's like, remember. But I think it handles it pretty well, actually.
What I like is that most of the flashbacks isn't for like the 12-year-old kids watching this show. It's for like the 30-year-old parents who remember Joe Grant and Sarah Jane Smith from the 70s. Because later on we see our good boy Bok. I've got a pin of Bok, and I'm showing it on screen to those listening to this episode.
Yeah, it's
our good old friend,
our beautiful boy.
From the demons.
Yes. But Joe Grant comes in with her grandson that she calls Babe, which for me thought, like, when I first saw the scene, I was like, holy crap, they're making her date a teenager? What is it? I was like, what? But it's quickly established that he's actually her grandson. But it was a shocking few minutes. I'll say that, yeah.
So the last time we saw Joe Grant was at the end of season 10 of the classic series, and she married somebody, and the doctor was like, "I can't marry you. I can't have you around in the TARDIS anymore because you're married. Bye bye." And he just abandons her basically. Because in the classic series, a companion would always go off because they're dating someone or they die or something,
or they just lightly flirt with a guy.
Yeah, or like Susan.
Yeah.
Great companions in the classic series.
Yeah.
But the last time we saw her, she was getting married, and the doctor abandoned her. And in the books, in the 8th Doctor books in like the late 90s, it was explained that she basically wound up getting divorced, and she lives in this tiny little house in Wales somewhere. And Russell T Davies really hated this idea because the last time we saw her, it was a happy ending for her. And the idea he wanted was to keep on the happy ending, because ruining it with a sad ending wouldn't be as compelling. And he does this later on at the end of the episode, where he basically gives every companion of a show a happy ending.
He
does. Which I think is a better way to conclude the stories.
Yeah. But Joe Grant comes in, and she's like, "Oh, I brought these lilies because I think they'd be appropriate, but they've smashed." And then she gets distracted by the giant vultures, and she's like, "God, you're so pretty. You look at you, you're majestic. Oh, I've missed looking at all these aliens. It's amazing. I wish I had my glasses. I'm so old now." And Sarah Jane spots her, and she's like, "Oh my God, I think I know who you are." And we also see with Joe Grant, like, we get a bit of her backstory, which they go into very heavily in a moment, where Joe Grant's like, "Oh, when I was living off in the Amazon for 6 months and doing all this," because what she's been doing after her traveling with the doctor is she's become like an environmentalist who like travels the globe with her family, protesting stuff and getting arrested and constantly fighting and not educating their kids, apparently. But it's an interesting take to take her character into this like hardcore environmentalist position. I
just love the idea that all the companions basically wound up defending the Earth in their own little ways. We're not fighting the Earth from aliens like Sarah Jane. We're just making the Earth a better place with environmentalism or charities or teaching people, which is perfect. It's perfect, I think.
Yeah. But Sarah Jane spots her, and she's like, "Oh my God, I know who you are." And then Joe Grant's like, "Oh, awesome! I kind of know who you are." And they have a wee hug and a get together, and we then cut to Iron Fist, who is of course played by Game of Thrones guy, whose name I just don't know, but whose face I definitely do know.
Finn Jones.
Finn Jones. He's not done much recently, has he? Since Iron Fist. Iron Fist kind of stopped him dead.
Yeah, unfortunately, that show was the death of the Marvel Netflix shows, I would say.
Well, they tried with Defenders after that, but yeah.
Defenders was half good, and I kind of dropped off after that. But I guess I'll have to get back into it.
I have to get back into rewatching Daredevil. I want to make my way through them all again, but yeah.
Daredevil is coming back next year, the year after. Can't wait. Yeah. 18 episodes, man.
Too many. But he does a fine enough job. He's got the perfect face for privileged-ish, preppy environmentalist kid. You know, you immediately buy that. Yeah, this is the type of kid that's like, oh, we traveled across Brazil and then hitchhiked up to the Antarctica. You know, and everyone's introducing themselves, and he says, "My name's Santiago," which a reference to Carmen Santiago, the lady that travels the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he's like, I'm called Santiago because I was like conceived or born or whatever at the in Santiago at the foot of the Andes, which Clyde's like, they should have just called you Andy, which is a great line. Like, this is also where we find out that he never went to school and that he just travels the world, as I said. Then the vulture people are like, shut the fuck up.
Yeah, which to me as a kid, hearing he didn't have to go to school was like, fuck, I wish I was you. This was when I was just starting at secondary school, and I hated it. I hated every single moment of secondary school.
Yeah.
And I was like, I was so envious of this kid played by Finn Jones, man.
Yeah. Then we cut to Sarah Jane and Joe Grant, and they're just reminiscing about being with the doctor, and Joe Grant's like, oh yeah, no, not Joe Grant. Sarah Jane's like, yeah, I only saw him like a few months ago, and you know, for the first time or whatever. And Joe Grant's like, well, he came back to you? What? He just left me. He just left me forever. I've never seen him again, which it was like, they really play into the tragedy of the doctor abandoning the companions with Joe. And she even gets like, she like confronts the doctor about it later on, which I really enjoyed.
Joe Grant in this episode is like Sarah Jane in the episode School Reunion. It's exactly the same arc, but it works as well. It works perfectly, and I really like the connection between Joe Grant and Sarah Jane, because they really get along. It's really lovely to see, because in School Reunion, Rose and Sarah Jane were kind of bickering at the start, which I really did not like. I really like the idea of companions just basically loving each other. Mm-hmm. And behind the scenes, they got on just as well, because they never met before, I don't think. And they just connected with stories of John Pertwee, which is lovely. It's exactly like on screen. Just connecting stories between the doctor.
And then they basically work out between them, because Joe's like, I would have thought when the doctor died I would have felt something, and Sarah Jane's like, hey, I said that as well. And then they're like, oh my god, the doctor's still alive, we think. And then they just, I guess, leave the funeral, because we cut to a different scene where they're like, okay, we need to remember. And Joe Grant's like, these candles will help us remember, because they're full of magic. Because she's this weird, like, hippy-dippy environmentalist lady.
Definitely.
And meanwhile, all the kids are like, yeah, we're just gonna leave. We're just gonna, you guys do that, and we're just gonna leave this room.
You know, this episode is kind of bizarre because it's a kids show, but yeah, they spend so much time with these two women in their 60s
talking about a show that came out in the 70s.
Yeah,
like,
I think it's just wonderful. I really like this, because the Sarah Jane Adventures did more connections between the modern series and the classic series more than New Who did.
Yeah, because
Sarah Jane Adventures would have episodes with the Brigadier, and you know, there's a lot of classic connections in there. It's wonderful. I really do miss this show, man. It's a shame it was cut so short.
Yeah. As the kids are leaving, we then get some heavy exposition, which was useful for me because I had never seen the episode, explaining the electricity that's been covering Clyde for some time, where he basically just gives away the entire plot of the last time the Doctor showed up in Sarah Jane, where he's like, it was this time loop thing, and then I clung onto the TARDIS, and I got left over with this like argon residual energy. Like, who gives a crap? It's TARDIS juice. He got TARDIS juice on him.
Yeah, it's such a load of nonsense, but it makes sense. But at the same time, it's just complete nonsense.
Yeah, he got TARDIS juice on him, and then the blue guy's like, "Hey, you smell thicker," because he's like, the time's getting closer, and then he like scuttles away, and all the kids chase after him, and they jump into a vent, which is the widest vent in the world. Like, it's so big, and
it just also feels like classic Doctor Who, because the last time we covered classic Doctor Who was with the Sea Devils with Joe Grant, and she spent most of that episode inside event.
But at least that event felt small and like,
Yeah.
This is like huge, like a ungodly sized vent. But they start crawling through the vents. We cut back to the vultures who are like, hey, we're secretly bad guys and we're going to get the memories from these old people and kill them. It's a good thing that we're also undertakers because we can just bury them. Ha 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 ha.
And also, it's a good thing that nobody's listening to us right now, so we can defeat our evil plans.
Yeah, but they start playing the music, and we start getting some nostalgia from Sarah Jane and Joe Grant, where they're like, "Oh, remember this episode? Oh, do you remember this episode?" And I'm like, "No, because I've never seen most of them."
There's a moment where Joe Grant remembers about the planet Carfel, where plants sing to her, which was never an episode, but there's a 6th Doctor episode where he mentions this planet and being on the planet with Joe Grant. So this makes that episode more canon, which is a really weird connection. That's Russell T Davies for you. He's a big fan of the show. Did you notice?
Yeah, what a nerd. They start listing off a bunch of villains as well. They're like, oh, Cyberman, Zygons, Azal, all these names that everybody's constantly remembering, especially Azal. How could anybody forget him?
Oh boy, we love Azal. Not as much as Bok, but Azal is just as good. He appeared next to Bok, so he's got a special place in our heart. Gets
like a bit of the Bok coolness, but not quite as much. As Clyde's listening in on the Undertaker bird people, is it a CGI vent across his face?
I would have to find that exact spot. Give me a second.
I've got it paused. It looks like it's just like CGI strips across his face.
Right, that could be a possibility. I guess the vents, and I don't know.
But it doesn't look real, does it?
No, it could be just an insert.
Yeah.
Interesting.
If you're looking for a good screen, God, I can't tell with BritBox's goddamn UI.
BritBox, it's 28 and 31 seconds left of the episode because we don't tell you how far you are in.
But
how far you got left.
The issue I've got, right, is I've got it paused on the perfect screenshot for this vent thing that I'm talking about. I hover my thumb, my cursor over the big ball that tells me what time stamp it is, but I can move my cursor left and right and the ball doesn't disappear, but the timestamp changes. So it's anywhere between 22 minutes and 4 seconds and 22 minutes and 34 seconds, and I have no idea which. I presume it would be in the middle.
No, on my screen, the ball starts at 20 minutes 38 seconds, and then it ends at 22 minutes and 49 seconds. So anywhere between those 2 minutes.
Well, it's because you've got it on a minimized window, don't you? Yeah, so it's even worse. But I'm pretty sure it's a CGI insert on top, which is just an interesting choice. But the vulture people are like, oh my god, we've been heard, let's chase after them, and they climb into the vent, and then we get a bit of comedy where all of the kids have to move backwards through the vent because there's not enough space to turn around, so they just like reverse the footage of them moving backwards, which is it's fun enough.
There's also a moment where Ronnie's like, I'm staring at your butt, Clyde, because this is a kid's show. This is definitely a kid's show.
It is indeed. And then, Sarah Jane and that snap out of their reminiscing dream that they were going into because the music stopped, and the kids are all like, "Oh my god, these guys are bad guys. They're lying through their beaks," is what Clyde says, because they're birds. And
then Sarah Jane and Joe Grant are very excited because it's just like the old days, solving mysteries with weird aliens, and Joe Grant even says, "Oh, groovy," which is just perfect.
Yeah, I love the word groovy. I say it literally all the time.
You fucking do.
So all the kids bump into Sarah Jane and Joe Grant, and they're like, "Oh my god, the Doctor's alive. We knew that he was alive." And then Clyde, with the voice of Clyde doing the best Matt Smith impression anybody's ever heard, is like, "Of course I'm alive, you freaking idiot." I thought that Matt Smith's voiceover here as Clyde was so unbelievably rude. Like, I get it's a stressful situation and stuff, but Matt Smith's Doctor is not normally that like aggressively just aggressive, you know?
Yeah, it does feel slightly out of character for the 11th Doctor, but
Yeah.
it's a stressful situation, as you said. He must have been on that planet for quite a while. I
Yeah.
imagine it's been like a few days or something.
Yeah. But then Clyde starts to transform, and we get the line where he looks at his hand and he goes, "Wait, that's not my hand. My hand's not white." As he then like gets just electrocuted and transforms into Matt Smith, which is just
The second Doctor to transform into Matt Smith in this show.
yeah. People love doing it. And when Matt Smith comes on, immediately, because it's Matt Smith, you just fall in love with him, and you're like, "Oh, you're so charming," because he's just a brilliant actor and an amazing portrayal of the Doctor. And he's like, "Yeah, I was trapped on this planet, and I've just swapped places with Clyde, and now Clyde's trapped on the planet. Oh, okay, Clyde's in a lot of danger," which I thought was just a very, very funny line. And then, of course, he goes like, "Oh, hello, Sarah Jane. Hello, Joe Grant. It's so lovely to see you after all this time." And he's got this really rude line to Joe Grant, actually, where Joe's like, "Oh my God, Doctor, you're like a baby now. You're so young." And he's like, "Really? You're fucking. Someone looks like someone shoved you in the oven. It's like looks like someone baked you." Because of course she's aged. She's aged quite a bit because many decades have passed since she was last on TV, and she, from the looks of it, hasn't had much, if any, surgery.
Which is great.
Yeah, naturally aging, but the Doctor's making fun of her for it, which again just feels slightly out of character for Matt Smith. But
so before this point, Russell T Davies had never met Katie Manning, but he knew that Katie Manning would be on board for this joke, and she completely was, which was perfect. Because otherwise, I think a lot of people would have taken a great offense to that.
Yeah. But hey, Matt Smith's got charisma pouring out his eyes. He can get away with saying a comment like that. Then he marches up to the giant vulture people, the Shanshith, I think they were called, and he's like, "Hey, have you been telling people I'm dead?" Which I thought was a great line. And they go like, "Oh, we might have sent out the word a little bit early, but don't worry, we can quickly rectify that." And then suddenly they can like shoot lightning out of their hands, and they just start electrocuting the Doctor, and it goes on for quite some time as everybody just stands and watches. And then we cut away, and this is because of why, Scott?
This is because originally when the episode was broadcast, it was split into two parts, as most Sarah Jane Adventures are, and it's 25-minute episodes, and this is the cliffhanger to part one. So of course, people standing around, because they can't resolve the cliffhanger that quickly, they have to make the cliffhanger believable. So
it has to be dramatic.
It feels like classic. It feels like a very classic Doctor Who cliffhanger.
Very much so, with the Doctor suddenly like on the about to die. But because this is not a two-parter, this is a one-parter, thanks to BritBox just combining all of the two-parters into very long episodes. Clyde is then stuck on the planet, and he's like, "Oh, what's this do?" And he zaps back into his own body, or his own position, I guess, sending the Doctor back to the planet, and amazingly the Shanshith realizes this and stops electrocuting Clyde like instantly. Clyde doesn't even get a little bit electrocuted, and Sarah Jane's like, "Okay, we've got to run now. We've got to run. Everybody through this door." And then we cut to Matt Smith on the planet, and he's like, "Oh, God damn it, I got to fix the machine again." And then we get this really nice transition, I thought, when everybody starts running. We then cut to them coming through a door, and it's Matt Smith and not Clyde going through the door, which I thought was just excellent little bit of comedy. And Sarah Jane's like, "Oh, wait, what? How does Matt Smith back?" You know,
it's fun, and also the transitions between the planet and the unit base. We do a great old pan wipe, which is a perfect scene transition. One of the things that Russell T Davies says on the commentary is that he regrets not having Matt Smith and Elizabeth Sladen hug or something.
Yeah.
Because David Tennant and Elizabeth Sladen would have more contact. Here, I think that is missing. It doesn't feel quite as emotionally resonant as David Tennant and Elizabeth Sladen in like School Reunion or something.
Yeah, although like School, they really give the quiet moment, I think, instead to Matt Smith and Joe. Where they have that sit-down conversation, because Sarah Jane's really already had her reconciliation with the Doctor. Now it's the other companion's turn, to rebuild that bridge.
I guess a part of me feels sad because this is Sarah Jane's final encounter with the Doctor on screen. And of course, we didn't know that at the time, but it just feels sad. There's no emotional wrap up at all.
Yeah. But they run into this room basically with a giant iron door, and the unit lady, who's a character that the show definitely didn't forget about until right now, comes back, and she's like, "Hey, where you going?" Matt Smith takes one look at her and slams the door in her face, opens it again, then goes, "Wait, no, sorry, I was slamming the door," and then he slams it in her face again. And then he says that he doesn't have a sonic screwdriver on him, and that Sarah Jane has to use the sonic lipstick, and Joe Grant makes a comment about sonic lipstick being really cool. And then he changes back into... he's like, "Hey, Joe, Sarah Jane, come here, hold my hands." They hold their hands, and he's like, "Do you remember back, in the 70s when we used to travel to different planets?" And then zap, Clyde comes back into the room as the Doctor, Sarah Jane, and Joe Grant all zap off to this big, very red planet.
Yes.
It is just exceptionally red, and he's like, "Oh, look, it's this planet here," and all the companions look on at amazement. And it's a pretty good actual matte painting special effects shot compared to the one we got previously, mainly because the matte painting is way off in the distance, and it makes it look more realistic whilst being pretty than right up in your face,
You just said matte painting. I was like, what? Painting of Matt Smith? Where?
No, a painting of me.
Oh yeah, you are also Matt.
I am.
I keep on forgetting you're a Matt because I think of you as Matthew.
Wow.
Those are different names in my head.
They're not. My entire family call me Matt. It is, everybody else just calls me Matthew, but my entire family, I'm a Matt. I'm a Matt in the house,
And also, it is lovely to just see Joe Grant and Sarah Jane Smith in a quarry again as an alien planet.
Yeah.
This is a total quarry.
Yeah. And we cut back to the kids, and they're like, "Hey, the unit lady's a bad guy." And the unit lady is somehow listening through this ginormous steel door. And she's like, they figured it out.
She has really good hearing.
Yeah.
She has sonic hearing.
She just listened real well. She's like, "Oh, we've got to trap the kids and lock them off." Then the little blue guy comes back in through the vent, and he's like, "Come with me, quick, if you want to live. Let's go back through the vent." And we get the exact same shot of the kids crawling through the vent we had before. The bad guys, the big vultures, are like, "Oh, we must prepare the thing to do our evil plan." And we see the TARDIS, and we're like, "Oh my god, it's the TARDIS. They've got the TARDIS. Oh no."
So on the commentary for this episode, Russell T Davies says, "On Doctor Who, he never had villains explicitly use the TARDIS as like a device to like steal the TARDIS or whatever, because that kind of solves a lot of problems with." It was Attack of the Cybermen where they try to steal the TARDIS to alter their own history, which is kind of like a cop-out, really. I don't like when monsters do that. And then here you're just like, yeah, but this is Sarah Jane Adventures. I can break my own rules. It's okay.
And we then cut back to Matt Smith on the planet, and he's basically just explaining what his season of TV was, where he's like, "I'm traveling with Amy and Rory now, and they're getting married, and they're off on this honeymoon planet, which is a planet that's not for honeymoons, but it's on a honeymoon because they got married to a moon, I think it was, but which is just a charming little line of dialogue.
Yeah. That feels like an 11th Doctor line.
Yeah. And then Joe Grant is ready to absolutely demolish him, and she's like, "I only left you because..." He's like, no, she's like, "You're traveling with a married couple?" And he's like, "Yeah, Mr. and Mrs. Pond," which of course isn't their last name. It's whatever Rory's last name was.
Williams.
Yeah. And Joe's like, "I only left because I was getting married, and you said that I couldn't be here anymore." And Matt Smith's just silent, and he's like, fuck. And he kind of doesn't answer that. He moves on, and he's like, "Oh no, you lived such an amazing life," but he really darts around the abandoning her because she got married conundrum.
But also the music in this scene and quite a lot of the episode where it goes with the women singing, it goes da 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 and whatever. It kind of reminds me of a soundtrack to Edward Scissorhands. Have you ever seen that film?
Once, and a very long time ago. So
I will send you a song from Edward Scissorhands and tell me it doesn't sound like the music from this episode.
So Scott has just sent me a clip from Edward Scissorhands. I would include a clip here, but the music is a fucking nightmare on YouTube, and it would just get flagged. So I recommend going out and listening to whatever song that was from the Edward Scissorhands soundtrack, and watching it with the scene here, because it's similar. It's slightly in different keys, and slightly different tempo, but it's definitely the same themes, which is this kind of like. I mean, Edward Scissorhands itself is like this tragic sort of romantic thing, isn't it? And that's what they're going for with this, is that tragic romantic feeling.
It also feels rather dreamy.
Yeah. But the doctor's like to Joe, I never came to see you because I couldn't find you. You were busy doing all this stuff. And Joe's like, oh my God, so you've been watching me this whole time? You've been paying attention to me? And the doctor's like, nah, I don't do that. I've got to keep moving forward. Once you're gone out of my life, you're gone forever. I can't stop. But David Tennant, when he was regenerating, took about 20 years, and he went off and looked at everybody. And so, like, I looked at you when I was doing that, and that's how I learned all those things about you. Which is a decent enough little explanation, I think, and giving Joe that happy ending and that conclusion with the doctor, that he doesn't hate her, and that etc., and that he actually does care. It's a very nice, quiet conversation that's happening. I very much enjoyed this scene.
Yeah, I really like it as well. And Elizabeth Sladen on set was completely happy to let this moment play out, because obviously she had her own moment with the 10th Doctor years before, and letting Katie Manning have the same moment on screen was just wonderful, because any other actress would have been like, hey, wait a minute, no, this is my show. You can't have this scene with Katie Manning. Yeah. But it's a really lovely scene, you know. It does make me happy, and even though I hate the ending of the end of time, where the Doctor just goes back and visits every companion, and every companion, or even more of it, we haven't seen apparently, according to Russell T Davies. So just imagine that extended cut. It'd be like Lord of the Rings. Yeah,
it'd be amazing. You'd just crying constantly as David Tennant looks out a window, really sad. Barbara.
And then he goes visit Susan, and he's like, hey, wait a minute, didn't I promise to visit you again? I never did that, oops. She has to turn up in the 60th, right?
Nah, she's not coming back.
Or the centenary, because they're already bringing back...
Maybe the centenary. I could see Chibnall doing it.
Because, you know, this is the whole reason I chose this episode.
First Doctor's really not Chibnall. Chibnall likes Fifth Doctor stuff.
Yeah, and Seventh, apparently.
Yeah. But
yeah, this is the whole reason why I chose this episode, because in the centenary special, the Doctor is going to die again, apparently. Yeah. And also, classic companions come in, and this is perfect fit for that episode. See, I'm thematic.
Yeah. But the Doctor gets interrupted by Sarah Jane being like, oh, we actually have to continue moving the plot forward now. And he's like, oh, yes, of course we do. And we cut to the kids with the little blue guy, and the blue guy's like, we're going to eat pizza. That's my plan. We're going to hide and eat pizza because the bad guys are scary. And I'm like, that's an amazing plan. I am 100% on board with that plan, you know?
But also, I imagine that pizza is like really, really old, because who's delivering pizza to this unit base? Unless it's like Torchwood, where anyone can just know the secret location. I guess they can know the secret location because there's a giant sign
that says unit. Yeah. But then the kids are sitting down and they're chatting about all their adventures they have and how fun their life is. And Iron Fist gets really sad because he's like, I've not seen my parents in 6 months. Or because my mum's off in Japan doing this. My dad was off in Antarctica with Gay Dads, the Gay Dad organization.
I think he actually says dads. So his dad's plural.
Dads and a mum? I guess polyamorous relationship, yeah. Or it could be that his dad had him and then figured out he was gay, and
birth donor. I guess the birth donor
could be,
woman was considered a mum to them, which is a nice little relationship, I think.
Yeah, but he's all sad that his family is all separated and they never really spend much time together, but which is a nice little bit of character stuff for him that doesn't really get resolved. No. He just goes back off on adventuring with his gran that calls him babe all the time, like a total weirdo.
But Russell T Davies wanted to bring back these characters again, but then obviously Elizabeth Sladen died, and also Finn Jones would end up in Game of Thrones in a couple of years, so he wouldn't be in the show again anyway.
Yeah, he's very good in Game of Thrones.
I'll never see it. He's not that good in Iron Fist.
He is very good in Game of Thrones. He was a favorite character of mine for a while in those early seasons, which is why I was excited when he got cast as Iron Fist, because I was like, awesome, this guy's going off to do good stuff. And then Iron Fist was like a big pile of crap. Although I don't think it was really his fault. From all the reports, it was like a mega rust production and like just a nightmare to work on. So.
Absolutely not his fault. Whenever it's a bad production and everything's bad about the production, I would never say it's the actor's fault. It's like the Star Wars prequels. It's mostly on George Lucas, doing a bad direction.
Shut up.
George Lucas would always say faster but more intense.
The prequels are excellent, so I need you to shut your face right now.
No.
Yeah, I won't
they
have.
Really aren't.
I will not have prequel slander on this podcast. It is a phenomenal series. It's the best trilogy in Star Wars. Hands
better
down.
than the original?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Absolutely. Like
you are dumb.
I would watch the prequels infinitely more times than the original trilogy. And the original trilogy is great. Don't get me wrong. I love it. The prequels hold such a place in my heart because they're so good.
Yeah, because you're like a child and you just really like bright lights and CGI and.
I mean,
look at Yoda's doing a backflip.
Yeah, I mean, we're watching Sarah Jane Adventures right now. So.
True.
That's exactly what I like.
Fair, but yeah, just being a little cave, little vent thing, and eating pizza is my dream as well. I'd absolutely love that.
Yeah. That's the goal. So, evil unit lady is like, all the kids are eating pizza in the vent. Awesome, let's cook them. Because, of course, they're hiding in a vent, which not only produces cold air, but can produce hot air as well.
Really?
And so she turns the heating up. Really, it was a bad place to hide when you think about it, wasn't it? It seemed like eating pizza was a good idea at the time, but at
least the pizza's getting cooked now.
Yeah, they should have thought about where they were. And she starts turning up the heat on them. It gets hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter. As she's like, the doctor's going to find out that these kids are dying, and he's going to choose to save them instead of saving the world because he's gullible and likes saving kids. Because he's the hero, and that's what heroes do, isn't it? And Sarah Jane and the doctor and that end up traveling back, and they don't need to replace Clyde anymore because the doctor fixes the machine. And they are like, oh, the kids are trapped in the vent. Quickly, let's open it. And Sarah Jane opens the vent like no bother with the sonic lipstick. Everybody's getting ready to climb on into it. Like, oh my God, we've got to save the kids. This is such a moment of tension.
Did they need the sonic lipstick if the kids have been in several vents today? And they take off the grate just easily. Why did they need a sonic lipstick?
It's for some action, because it goes brrr. But the doctor jumps into the vent and he goes running to go save the kids. Joe's like, okay, Sarah Jane, you go in next and I'll follow after. Sarah Jane doesn't answer. Joe looks to her right and there's a giant vulture man holding her, and then she gets grabbed herself. The doctor notices that the two companions aren't with them, and he's like, oh God, Sarah Jane, Joe, where are you? As the kids scream for help, and he's kind of like this torn where he's like, oh, who do I go save right now? And he's about to go for save Sarah Jane, and then he second guesses himself and it's like, no, I've got to save the kids. And he goes off to save the kids, to which the unit lady is like, mwahaha, I knew he wouldn't let kids be murdered. This is a TV show, a children's TV show. As Sarah Jane and that get brought in to meet evil unit lady, and we find out really what their plan is going to be, where it's like, we're going to strap you to a machine and make you imagine the key because we're big evil bird people and we want to stop death across the universe. Mohaha.
It's such a ridiculous script. Honestly, you're gonna sit there and imagine the key to a machine, to a door you've not seen in 30 years.
Yeah.
They totally remember what the key looks like.
I think the music rebuilds their memories though, because they start like remembering all that shit. But before they get properly strapped in, the doctor saves the kids. And he's like, oh, I can't turn around in this vent. And Clyde's like, you're just going to have to back the fuck up then. When really the doctor could step out for half a second, turn around and walk back. But I guess it leads to the funny set piece of him staring Clyde in the face as Clyde's asking him questions. And Clyde's like, are you always going to be a white dude? And he's like, no, I could be whatever. And then he's like, how many times can you change? And the doctor says 507, which breaks canon. because really it was 13, and Matt Smith's actual regeneration was all based around him being the last one technically because of all the other regenerations he had done before.
Well, it doesn't break canon because
it's clearly
Russell
a
T.
joke.
Davis, Russell T. Davis wrote it as a joke
It's
for the
clearly
Doctor to say.
I know, I'm just being
it's a joke by the
pedantic.
Doctor.
I'm being pedantic, Scott. You
But
know?
a lot of people did have raised eyebrows in this episode there, being like, 507? No, Russell T. Davis, you don't know anything about Doctor Who.
It's 13, when actually the answer is now infinite. So
There might
507 could be, yeah.
With the whole timeless child thing, this could be the 507th Doctor, for all we know.
Yeah, it's good stuff. It's good stuff.
But yeah, also the foreshadowing to the Doctor could be black someday. I'm sure that will never happen in our lifetime.
Impossible. We cut back to Joe and that briefly as they get, well, really, this is the scene where they get explained everything as the Doctor rocks up to their door and he's like, oh, the door's locked. We also find out that the unit lady is doing this because...
I think she's
like
just kind of...
no, but like her reason is that I can travel the stars. Like her reasoning is literally just because that's her reason. Because she's like, I get to travel the stars. There's nothing left for me here on Earth, which kind of is like something happened to her, but they never explore what that is. She's lost family or she's lost a loved one or Unit's doing some. I guess Unit is run by a snake man. So,
oh god, yeah.
It really is, isn't it? So you really wouldn't want to be part of that at that point, would you?
Unit is such an inconsistent thing in Doctor Who, because if you think of the classic series, you think of Unit as being like an old, it feels like a, I don't know what Unit feels like in the classic series. It feels like a school building that's rebuilt into like a soldier base.
It does. They just, the Unit in the old series just feel like soldiers. They're just we are the army, but we can't legally say we're the army because we're doing sci-fi stuff. So we'll just say that we're Unit. You know.
But here it just feels like, oh yeah, we're a secret organization, kind of.
Yeah.
And we wear these funny hats.
Yeah, we do wear the red berets. But that was kind of Russell T. Davis's version of Unit, though, wasn't it? You know, because when he brought them back, they were just kind of like keeping a big warehouse of alien shit. Like, they were just kind of like bumbling around, and then they get completely wiped out. Torchwood comes in. Torchwood gets completely wiped out. Unit rebuilds and is now like MI5 in the Moffat era. And... it's still like MI5 in the Chibnall era as well, except it's run by a snake man. Yeah.
Such a bizarre history of Unit. I'm sure if you go through the Big Finish stories as well, you'll be like, this makes no sense.
Yeah.
Nothing adds up.
Yeah. But that's the joy of Doctor Who. As the Joe and that are strapped up to the big machine and they're getting forced to remember, Matt Smith comes. He's like, "Oh, I can't get through the door. If you let me through the door, I'll give you the key. I've got the original." And the Vulture was about to do it, but Unit Lady's like, "If you let him through, he'll just stop us. He won't give us the key. It's such an obvious ploy."
I like the idea of Matt Smith just dangling the keys in front of him, distracting them as if they're babies.
And then he gives this really big speech, which, of course, if you've got Matt Smith, he's going to give a speech. And he's basically, he's telling them to remember, like, everything, you know, remember all the adventures and shit that we went on and all that stuff. And this is where we get a heap of flashback, like, they come rapid fire fast. Yeah. Like, there is so many, like, quick cuts of classic Who adventures. Some of them I recognized, most of them I did not.
Yeah, basically Matt Smith is giving a big speech to a door, and he's acting his ass off, even in the kids' show. It's like, yeah, Matt Smith is just such a brilliant actor. And also the whole thing, to begin with, we're like, oh yeah, remember all the monsters, remember all the friends. Oh yeah, Joe, remember every place you went to. And we just cut to a lot of stock footage.
Yeah, the Joe stuff is like, oh, it's such a shame that they didn't have anything for Joe at all.
And that's how it ends, just stock footage. Yeah, but yeah, we do get Bok.
We do get Bok. We get the Master, Roger Delgado's Master. We get a guy that looks like Peter Capaldi but isn't. Yep. We get Daleks, Cybermen.
We get Patrick Troughton, John Pertwee, William Hartnell.
Yeah.
From the Three Doctors, which is a wonderful inclusion.
But
weirdly enough, we don't get the Fifth Doctor. I don't think I've seen him in there.
You just get 1 to 4. That was the only ones you get.
Sarah Jane did meet the Fifth Doctor in the Five Doctors. There's no footage from K9 and Company.
No.
With Sarah
Soil
Jane Smith.
and the kid that was with her. Yeah. Yeah.
In that weird house and the mumbly old man.
Yeah, the guy that was definitely drunk. What a great time. But they with all of these things and their thoughts, and then their thoughts about their more modern life that the kids introduce, the key doesn't get made, and everything goes tits up, and it's like, oh shit, things are about to explode. And then they're like, let's get through the door, but they can't now because the sonic lipstick is fried because of shut up.
I forgot to mention that we basically get a second from every single episode of the Sarah Jane Adventures, including Bradley Walsh, who would of course be Graham in the Chibnall era.
Yes,
because he was in Sarah Jane Adventures before.
That was
Doctor
his. That was his cousin.
The weird clown man was his cousin.
Yeah. Martha style. You know how Martha died, but that was really just her cousin. She's fine. But they're like, oh, we're going to explode, Doctor. We're going to die. This is goodbye. We thought it was your funeral, but actually it's our funeral. And then the Doctor's like, oh, wait, it's my funeral. Go hide in the empty coffin. And they're like, oh, of course. And they go hide in the empty coffin while everybody else explodes. And it's a pretty impressive looking explosion. Like the door goes flying off its hinges in a pretty decent looking practical effect. And then they survive, and the Doctor's like, hey, you survived, isn't that lovely?
Apparently Russell T Davies told the director of this episode, please don't have them actually be inside the coffin, because having two 60-year-olds in a coffin kind of feels like an insult, kind of. Yeah. But they survive from being inside the coffin, and they leave, and really that's the end of the episode. It's now just the epilogue at this point. Also, there's a point where the 11th Doctor calls from Smith and Jones, which Russell T Davies really loves the motif of Smith and Jones for some reason.
It's got a good mouthfeel, doesn't it? But what's interesting, I think, is the way that they resolve this issue with these aliens that are trying to cease death. Is they just blow them up and they leave. They're like, well, that's them dead. Oh well, problem solved. The unit commander's dead. There was a huge explosion at a unit base, and nobody gives a shit. Like, I guess it's a kid's show, and you've got 6 minutes left. You can't really get into any of this stuff, but they straight up just murder the aliens, and then we win.
It is very strange.
Yeah. It's
also we didn't speak about their whole plan. Their plan was to use the TARDIS to prevent all the deaths in the world, which kind of it feels like a Thanos kind of plan. Yeah. Kind of, but in a more less destructive way. They just want to save people, which, villain plans, they feel like for good guys in the end, they just die.
Although it's an interesting plan, because their whole idea is they're like, we do so many funerals and we see so much death and we're sick of it. We want death to stop, so we're going to stop death. But if they stop people dying, wouldn't they then be out of a job?
Yeah. But their new job is
stopping people dying. Yeah.
And that will always be their job, which is stopping people from dying is still helping people die.
Although the fact that their job is to do a lot of funerals, they should know beforehand that them traveling back in time to stop people dying doesn't work, because otherwise they wouldn't be doing all these funerals to begin with.
True, but if you think of Doctor Who as like a sliding timeline where things constantly change in the past, which is why the canon is so fucked up.
Yeah.
It's
because time travel's messy.
It really is. Making a whole show about time travel is for 60 years is going to lead to a lot of problems.
Yeah. But that's the problem solved, and everybody transports back through the TARDIS into Sarah Jane's house. We get to see inside Matt Smith's TARDIS, which is great because it's one of my favorite TARDISes ever. It's fucking gorgeous to look at. And Joe Grant's like, oh, it's the same old TARDIS. Looks different, but smells the same. And then she's like, oh, I can't stay, though, because if I stay, I'll be here forever, and I'm too old to continue adventuring with you. But this has been lovely, and Matt Smith's like, yep, I've got to go as well, but it's been a pleasure. And then they're like, hey, if you died, Doctor, would we find out? And he's got this great line where he's like, if I die, if that ever happens, if it ever comes that I'm no longer existing, I think the whole universe would feel a shiver. And then he's like, pauses for a beat and then goes, hua! And it makes them jump. It's this wonderful little bit.
But before that, Joe mentions the Time Lords to the Doctor, which obviously she doesn't know the Time Lords are extinct at this point. And the Doctor just gives her a glare, like just with pain behind his eyes. It's
Yeah,
really
which
good, subtle acting.
is really great for Matt Smith's Doctor, because his whole arc was, saving the Time Lords and trying to get the Time Lords back, and eventually succeeding in that, but costing him his own regeneration. And then, of course, they just get murdered and turn into Cybermen.
Yeah.
It's same with Capaldi. His whole arc of let's find my home and spend 1,000 years punching a wall so that I can break through into Gallifrey.
I mean, when Capaldi went to Gallifrey, his first thing he did was to shoot one of the Time Lords in the face.
Yeah, it was because that guy was a dick, but like, I think there's untapped potential in Gallifrey. So much untapped potential in Gallifrey.
We'll see what Russell T Davies does. I don't know if he'll ever bring back Gallifrey or if it's going to be just destroyed now, because he was the person who also destroyed Gallifrey in the first place.
Yeah, it was Moffat. It was Moffat that brought them back. You know. But
so I think Russell will just keep the Time Lords dead.
Yeah, probably, which is a shame.
Yeah, it's such a bizarre canon.
But then everybody leaves the TARDIS after saying goodbyes to Matt Smith, and we get just an extremely long shot of the TARDIS dematerializing. I felt like it took forever for the TARDIS to dematerialize this time around. Like, it goes on for fucking ages. And then
I think it works because we get cutbacks to like Jo just watching the TARDIS disappear, and she's in tears. Just it's really good acting for Jo. I think she's great.
Oh, I think she's great in this episode. Yeah, she's got a really solid performance. But we then cut outside where everybody's saying their goodbyes. Iron Fist is like, God, I need to talk to my parents because they don't love me. And the kids are like, yeah, you should probably do that. Then Jo rocks up and she's saying her goodbyes to everybody. And there's this bit of like quirky humor where she's like, oh, wait, where are my glasses? Oh, they're on my head, of course. That's where they would be. And she's saying their goodbyes. And
she also keeps kissing Clyde.
Yeah, I know. She loves him. But they wave goodbye and drive off into the sunset, although it's like midday. And this is where Sarah Jane, it gives this huge fucking bit of exposition where she's like, oh, by the way, I've done a heap of research on every other companion that's ever traveled with the Doctor, and this is what they're doing. And she just rattles off names, which I've 100% forgotten, where she's like, Tegan, actually, I know she said Tegan's in Australia working with Aboriginals. Yeah. Then she says a bunch of other things. Which I've
got a whole list in front of me.
Go on then.
Liz Shaw is working on the unit moon base. The Brigadier is stranded in Peru. Barbara Wright and Ian Chesterton are married and professors at Cambridge University and seemingly haven't aged since the 60s, which is a nice touch because obviously the actress who played Barbara died in the 80s. So just having her alive somewhere and seemingly not aged is kind of nice. Ben and Polly are married and run an orphanage in India. Harry Sullivan had worked on vaccines that saved thousands of lives. Tegan, you've said that. And a companion named Dorothy has raised billions of pounds through her non-profit organisation, A Charitable Earth. And obviously Dorothy is Ace. We've seen Ace. She's coming back. Right. Which I wonder if they'll keep this as canon.
Isn't Tegan coming back as well?
Yeah, she is. So
we'll see if she's going to mention working in Australia. Yeah. That'll be... Yeah. Is Chibnall up to date with his Sarah Jane Adventures lore? That's the question.
This TV show had ended like 11 years ago.
Yeah, and that like not many people like besides children watched.
But I really like the idea of just having all the companions just live happy lives, apart from the ones obviously who died on screen.
Yeah,
which don't get mentioned, but
yeah. Like she doesn't do research into what's his name that exploded, the kid crashed into the planet.
Oh yeah, Adric. Yeah.
Adric, yeah. Like, yeah, but that brings us to the end of the episode. What did you think about the death of the Doctor, Scott?
As a third Doctor fan, I think this is like a really nostalgic episode for me. It's not great in terms of like scripting, but it's just fun, you know? It's a fun adventure. I would recommend it to people if you haven't seen the Sarah Jane Adventures before. There's like other episodes you could probably start with are much better. But if you're like a fan of Jo Jones and Matt Smith as the Doctor and you want to see them interact, because Matt Smith never interacted with classic companions before. It's just so much fun. I enjoyed it. What about you?
Yeah, I actually really enjoyed this episode. You know, on BritBox, it's 51 minutes because it's the two-parters cut together, but I didn't feel it being slow really at any point. And comparing it to really the only other episode of Sarah Jane Adventures that I have in my mind, which is the last one we covered last year, which was the pilot, this is infinitely better. The tone is right. The humor, while being obviously aimed at kids, sometimes is pretty funny. The performances are all really solid from the main cast. I don't dislike any of the characters. I really enjoyed my time.
Even the kids are great.
Yeah,
the kids are great in this show.
I really enjoyed my time with this episode. It's lighthearted and just a bit of it's kids TV, so it's nothing too serious, and you definitely don't need to watch it. But if you really love Matt Smith Adventures, this is another one you might not have seen, and is worth watching because he's ever charming in it as he is in everything.
Yeah, and I wish they could have continued the Sarah Jane Adventures. Follow Jo, what she's up to.
The Jo Adventures.
Yeah, the Jo Adventures.
Yeah.
The Jo Jones.
Jo
show.
Jones. The Jo Jones Show. Yeah. Starring Iron Fist.
Oh god, imagine if they cast him in the main role and he never did Game of Thrones, he never did Iron Fist. Wonder how different his career would have went.
He could still have stuff coming up that he's working on, or he's probably in some random Amazon show that we just don't know about. What's his IMDb look like?
Oh my god, I just realized his last name is Jones. We have Jo Jones, Finn Jones.
Yeah. What's his career looking like? What's he got coming up?
He did a movie called Awake last year. This is his last movie. He's got a show coming up called Swimming with Sharks. It's inspired by the 1994 film of same name, premiering on Roku, which is like an American
streaming service. Yeah.
So
he's doing stuff. He's doing
probably
stuff.
Not the best show, but
he's doing stuff though. He's working. He's got to get back up. He'll get into a AAA thing again. He's a really good actor, so I can see it happening. He'll be cast as the next Doctor.
I wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah, and then they'd have to explain the Sarah Jane Adventures. He did it to remember to visit old companions. That's
another thing I should have. Sarah Jane. At the end of its Sarah Jane Adventures is her living on forever, just solving crimes of aliens and all that again. But in modern canon, with the lockdown, Russell T Davies wrote a story where Sarah Jane actually dies, which is interesting because here he wants Jo Jones to have a happy ending, but. Yeah, Sarah Jane dies. So
maybe he was just depressed during lockdown.
Probably we all were.
He was just like, I'm gonna write a character dying because that's what I'm thinking about right now.
I wonder if he'll ever mention Sarah Jane dying in the proper show. So it's 60th anniversary. I imagine there's gonna be a reference in there somewhere.
They'll do something. Yeah, they'll do something. I feel like they might have done before already. Surely.
If we haven't mentioned Sarah Jane, but we've mentioned the Brigadier dying soon after he died.
Yeah.
Around about the same time, sadly.
Yeah.
There was 2 months between the two.
And then he gets turned into Cyberman.
God.
But yeah, good stuff. Next week, Scott, what have we got coming up?
We are doing the 9th Doctor story, Dalek, which is a big turning point. Again, another Russell T Davies era episode, but a big turning point for the show because the episodes before that were fun and silly, but this is where the show took a really serious vibe. And the back half of season 1 is just amazing from Dalek onwards. It's incredible television.
Absolutely. Dalek's such a good episode. I can't wait to watch it. It's phenomenal. But until then, if you've got any Sarah Jane Adventures trivia or any memories from watching that show, send us.
I've got trivia for you.
Shut the fuck up.
Did you know Luke has no belly button?
Who's Luke?
The kid, the phone kid, the video call kid, Sarah Jane kid. Are you being serious? He has no belly button.
Luke's from Star Wars, Scott.
You're so funny.
You're being
fucking continue what you're saying.
You're being silly. Send us an email at whowatcheswhopod@gmail.com, and we will read it out at the end of the month. That's whowatcheswhopod@gmail.com. In the meantime, this podcast is available in audio form wherever you listen to podcasts, as well as Amazon Music now. That's a new thing that happened very recently. There's a heap of links in the description. It's also available on YouTube in video form, where you can see my gorgeous face and also Scott's face at Who Watches Who on YouTube. We're extremely easy to find on YouTube, thankfully, which is awesome. What else is there that I need to say at this point? I think that's all of it. Oh yeah, Twitter is at Watches Doctor. Facebook is Who Watches Who. That is all of this. Follow me on Twitter at Cloth223 if you so desire. I don't tweet often because I'm not really on social media. Besides all of that, we'll be back next Friday with Dalek, as Scott said. And until then, bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.